Something passed by our sun last year, and almost no one on Earth understood what they were looking at until it was already leaving. Not a planet, not an asteroid, not anything born in this solar system at all. It came from another star, from another sky, from a place so far away that the light from its origin left before our own sun had even finished forming. And when astronomers finally realized what they were tracking, the first thing they said was not excitement. It was disbelief, because the numbers did not make sense. The object was moving too fast to belong here. Its chemistry did not match anything in our neighborhood, and its age, when they finally calculated it, was older than the sun itself. Read that again. Older than the star that gives us light. Older than Earth, older than the moon, older than every rock beneath your feet. This is the story of 3Iatlas. And what most people still do not understand is that the strange part is not a rumor about mysterious objects circling it. The strange part is real. It is documented. It is happening right now in observatories and space agencies around the world. And it has quietly split the scientific community in a way that has not happened in years. On the 1st of July 2025, a robotic telescope sitting in the mountains of Chile picked up a faint smudge of light moving against the background stars. The telescope was called ATLAS, short for the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, and its entire purpose is to watch the sky for anything that could threaten Earth. It was built to catch killer asteroids before they catch us, but what it caught that day was not a threat. It was something far rarer. Within hours, astronomers around the world began pulling archived images, checking older data, trying to understand what they were looking at. What they found sent a quiet shockwave through the astronomy community. This object was not orbiting the sun the way every planet, asteroid, and comet in our solar system does. It was moving on a hyperbolic path, a trajectory so extreme that it could only mean one thing. This object did not belong to us. It came from outside. It came from interstellar space. And here is where it gets worse. This was only the third time in recorded human history that something like this had ever been confirmed. Before this, there had been exactly two. The first was 1I Oumuamua, discovered in 2017. A strange, elongated object that behaved so oddly that some scientists still argue about what it actually was. The second was 2I Borisov, discovered in 2019, which behaved more like a normal comet, but still carried its own unanswered questions. And now, in 2025, came the third. Astronomers named it 3Iatlas. The number 3 tells you it is only the third of its kind ever confirmed. The letter I tells you it is interstellar, a visitor from beyond our solar system. And what most people are not seeing is just how significant that number 3 actually is. Each new interstellar object does not just add one more data point. It expands what scientists call the population sample by 50%. 3 objects instead of 2 might sound small, but in a field where you have almost nothing to compare against, that is an enormous leap in understanding. This is not just a new comet. This is a new chapter in how we understand the universe beyond our own sun. But the moment scientists began digging into its speed, the story escalated fast. When it was first discovered, 3Iatlas was already moving at roughly 137,000 miles per hour. Think about what that means. That is faster than almost anything humanity has ever built. As the sun's gravity pulled it closer, its speed increased even further, reaching around 153,000 miles per hour at its closest approach. And here is the detail that stopped astronomers cold. This object did not pass close enough to any planet to have been slingshotted to that speed. It could not have picked up that velocity from anything inside our solar system, which means it was already moving that fast before it ever arrived. It carried that speed with it from wherever it came from, across a distance so vast that human language barely has words for it. This is not chaos. This is physics revealing a truth most people will never fully process. Something out there in the depths of the galaxy threw this object toward us millions or even billions of years ago, and we are only now catching a glimpse of where it has been. And this is where everything changes. When researchers calculated the age of this object, they did not get a number in the millions of years. They got a number that reaches into the billions. Some estimates place its formation at somewhere between 8 and 11 billion years ago. Let that sink in for a moment. Our own sun is roughly 4.5 billion years old. Earth is younger still. This object, this frozen wanderer now passing through our neighborhood, may have existed for twice as long as our entire solar system. It formed before our sun ignited. It drifted through the galaxy while our own star was still just a cloud of gas waiting to collapse into existence. According to the latest research published in 2026, scientists believe 3Iatlas may be a genuine relic from what astronomers call cosmic noon, a period roughly 9 to 13 billion years ago when star formation across the galaxy was at its most intense. This is not just an old rock. This may be one of the oldest physical objects human eyes have ever directly observed and studied up close. What most people are not seeing is that age alone was not the only clue that something unusual was happening here. As 3I-Atlas approached the sun, it began doing exactly what comets do. It started releasing gas and dust, forming what scientists call a coma, a glowing cloud around its icy core, along with tails streaming away from it. On the surface, this looked normal. Comets from our own solar system do this constantly. But when researchers pointed some of the world's most powerful instruments at it, including the Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile, they discovered something that made them stop and recheck their data multiple times. The water inside 3I-Atlas was not ordinary water. It contained an extraordinarily high concentration of deuterium, a heavier form of hydrogen. According to the study, the deuterium levels in this comet's water were more than 40 times higher than what is found in Earth's oceans, and more than 30 times higher than what is typically found in comets from our own solar system. Read that again. 40 times higher than Earth, 30 times higher than anything born in our own solar neighborhood. Here is why that number matters so much. Deuterium enrichment like this does not happen randomly. According to the researchers who led the study, this kind of chemical signature forms only under extremely specific conditions, in molecular clouds so cold that they sit below 30 degrees above absolute zero, colder than negative 240 degrees Celsius. That is a temperature colder than almost anywhere naturally occurring in our own solar system today. What this tells scientists is staggering. The environment where 3I-Atlas was born was fundamentally different from the environment that produced our sun, our planets, and everything we know. This is not a local object with a strange orbit. This is a physical sample of a completely different stellar nursery, one that formed under conditions we have never been able to study directly until now. Interstellar objects like this are being described by researchers as time capsules, carrying frozen chemical fingerprints from the environments where entirely different planetary systems were born, possibly around a star that no longer even exists. But the mysteries did not stop with its water. As 3I-Atlas crept closer to the sun through late 2025, instruments detected something else that caught researchers off guard. Most of the water vapor being released from the comet was not spraying outward evenly in every direction, the way you would expect from a rotating icy body being heated by sunlight. Instead, an unusually large portion of it was being emitted directly toward the sun. According to European Space Agency reports released in 2026, the comet was releasing water vapor equivalent to roughly 70 Olympic swimming pools every single day, and the majority of that vapor was streaming sunward rather than in the expected outward pattern. This is not typical cometary behavior. Scientists are still working to fully explain why. And when a natural process breaks the pattern this dramatically, even the most cautious researchers start asking harder questions. Then, in June 2026, the story escalated again, and this time it reached the public in a way that could not be ignored. The team, led by researchers at NASA Goddard, using the James Webb Space Telescope's powerful NIR SPEC instrument, published a study in the journal Nature, revealing something that had never been measured in any object of its kind. The ratio of methane to water in 3I-Atlas's coma was roughly 11 times higher than anything ever recorded in a previous comet, asteroid, or interstellar visitor. 11 times higher. Not double, not triple. 11 times. The scientific explanation offered by the research team is that this results from natural thermal outgassing processes tied to the object's ancient and unusual composition. But the sheer scale of the anomaly was enough to reignite a debate that had been simmering quietly since the very first weeks after its discovery. Because here's what most people watching the headlines did not fully grasp. Almost from the moment 3I-Atlas was confirmed as interstellar, one prominent voice in the scientific community began raising a very different kind of question. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, known for his controversial suggestion years earlier that the first interstellar object, Oumuamua, might have been artificial rather than natural, turned his attention to 3I-Atlas almost immediately. As the new chemical data emerged in 2026, Loeb appeared publicly and, referencing the unusually high methane readings, posed a question that many scientists found provocative, bordering on reckless. He asked whether the chemistry could be indicative of microbial activity inside what he described as an iceberg drifting through space. This is where the story stopped being a quiet astronomy update and became something the entire internet could not stop talking about. But here is where it gets worse, or perhaps more accurately, here is where it gets more complicated, because the scientific community did not stay silent. Loeb has a long history of proposing that unexplained interstellar visitors could be extraterrestrial technology, going back to his hypothesis about Oumuamua and even a mysterious meteor known as Kineos 2014 Uro-1, their fate. Other researchers pushed back hard. Astronomer Samantha Lawler publicly stated that while it is important to remain open-minded about testable predictions, some of the claims being floated about 3I-Atlas pushed that open-mindedness to its absolute limit. She reminded the public of one of science's oldest and most important rules. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the evidence being presented for an artificial origin was, in her words, absolutely not extraordinary. Loeb himself, to his credit, has admitted in his own writing that the most likely outcome is that 3I-Atlas is a completely natural interstellar comet. But he has defended his hypothesis as, in his words, an interesting exercise worth exploring regardless of its likely validity. And that single sentence tells you everything about why this story refuses to die. Even the person raising the alien possibility admits it is probably wrong, and yet the question keeps spreading anyway, because the idea itself is simply too powerful to ignore. So scientists did something that should reassure anyone following this story with genuine curiosity rather than fear. They decided to actually check, not speculate, not argue on television. Check. In June 2026, researchers at the SETI Institute pointed the Allen Telescope Array, a network of radio dishes built specifically to hunt for signs of intelligent life, directly at 3I-Atlas. For more than 7 hours, they scanned a massive range of radio frequencies, from 1 to 9 gigahertz, searching for narrowband signals, the kind of signal that nature does not produce on its own, but technology does. According to the published results, the team identified nearly 74 million individual signals during the observation window. 74 million. But when they filtered out human-made interference and satellite signals and anything that did not match the comet's exact movement across the sky, that number collapsed down to roughly 200 candidates worth reviewing. And after careful analysis, every single one of those remaining signals was traced back to something entirely mundane. Technology on the surface of Earth, our own orbiting satellites. Not one signal, not a single one out of 74 million, showed any evidence of coming from 3I-Atlas itself. Think about what that means. This was not a quiet dismissal. This was one of the most sensitive techno-signature searches ever conducted on an interstellar object, using real instruments built for exactly this purpose, and the result was silence. Total, measurable silence. As one of the lead researchers on the project put it, the goal of studying interstellar objects is not just to prove or disprove alien technology in any single case, but to understand what a natural interstellar object actually looks like, so that if something truly artificial ever does pass through our solar system, scientists will finally know how to recognize it. In other words, 3I-Atlas may not be the anomaly people hoped it would be, but studying it in this much depth is exactly what prepares humanity to properly identify the real thing, if it ever comes. And the investigation did not stop with radio telescopes. This became, without exaggeration, one of the most thoroughly observed objects in the history of solar system astronomy. NASA mobilized an extraordinary array of assets to study 3I-Atlas as it crossed the inner solar system, including the Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, the TESS satellite, the Swift Observatory, Sphere-X, the Perseverance rover on Mars, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the MAVEN spacecraft, the Europa Clipper mission, the Lucy spacecraft, the Psyche spacecraft, the Parker Solar Probe, the Punch mission, and the joint ESA and NASA Solar Observatory SOHO. On the European side, the Mars Express Orbiter and the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter observed the comet as it passed within about 29 million kilometers of Mars in early October 2025. The Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, known as JUICE, captured detailed observations in November 2025 using its cameras, spectrometers, and particle sensors, though the bulk of that data did not even reach scientists on Earth until February 2026. Months later, because of the sheer distance involved. This is where you start to understand the real scale of what happened here. An object from another star system passed close enough for a brief cosmic moment that nearly every major space agency on Earth turned its instruments toward it at once. And then there is the detail that almost nobody outside the astronomy community noticed, but which quietly made history. In late November and early December of 2025, two X-ray telescopes, X-RISM and XMM Newton, detected a faint, diffuse glow of X-rays surrounding the nucleus of 3I-Atlas. This made it the very first interstellar comet ever observed in X-ray light. Not the first interstellar comet ever discovered. The first ever seen glowing in a part of the spectrum normally associated with some of the most violent and energetic processes in the universe. Every new instrument that turned toward this object seemed to reveal another layer that had never been documented before in anything not born in our own solar system. Despite everything happening around it, the truth is that 3I-Atlas was never a threat to Earth. And it is important to say that clearly because fear spreads faster than facts. At its closest approach to our planet, the comet remained roughly 1.8 astronomical units away, close to 170 million miles, which is a genuinely safe distance with enormous margin. Its closest approach to the Sun itself came on October 30th, 2025, at a distance just inside the orbit of Mars, meaning it never crossed into the region where Earth orbits at all. NASA has stated plainly and repeatedly that there was zero danger from this object. But here's the part that keeps this story alive, even without any danger attached to it. Danger was never really the point. Mystery was the point. An object that predates our sun, carrying water chemistry unlike anything born here, releasing gas in patterns scientists still cannot fully explain, briefly visible to nearly every major telescope humanity has ever built, and then gone again, forever, back into the dark between the stars. Because that is the part that most people still are not sitting with. 3Iatlas is leaving. It already passed its closest point to the sun. It swept past Jupiter in March 2026, using the giant planet's gravity to bend its path slightly on its way out, though not enough to capture it into any kind of orbit around our sun. It is now heading back out into interstellar space, and it will never return. Not in 100 years, not in 1,000. This was not a visitor on a returning orbit like the comets we are used to seeing decade after decade. This was a one-time encounter with an object that formed around a star we cannot identify, in a part of the galaxy we cannot pinpoint, at a point in cosmic history before our own solar system had even finished coming together. Once it crosses back out beyond the reach of our telescopes, the data we have already collected may be the only data humanity ever gets. There will be no follow-up mission, no second look. What we have recorded in this brief window is, for all practical purposes, permanent. And this raises a question that scientists are only beginning to seriously plan around. The European Space Agency has confirmed that it is developing a mission called Comet Interceptor, a spacecraft specifically designed to be ready and waiting in space so that when the next unpredictable visitor arrives, whether from our own solar system or from somewhere much farther away, humanity will not simply watch it fly past like an afterthought. This time we caught 3Iatlas, almost by accident, reacting after the fact, scrambling telescopes and spacecraft into position as fast as possible once the discovery was confirmed. According to ESA, it is possible, though considered unlikely given how rare these objects are, that Comet Interceptor could even be positioned to intercept a future interstellar object directly, rather than simply observing one from a distance. Think about what that would mean. Not just watching a message from another star system pass by from millions of miles away, but potentially flying alongside it, close enough to truly study what it is made of, where it might have come from, and what it might be trying, in its own frozen, ancient, silent way, to tell us about the universe beyond our own small corner of it. Because that is really what 3Iatlas forced humanity to confront, whether people realized it consciously or not. For the first time in a very long time, scientists across the world were handed physical, touchable, measurable proof that our solar system is not an isolated bubble floating alone in the void. Other stars exist, other planetary systems formed, some far colder and stranger than our own, some possibly far older than the sun that keeps us alive. And every few years, fragments of those distant, unreachable worlds drift close enough for us to notice for just a few fleeting months, before disappearing again into a darkness so vast that our fastest spacecraft could never hope to follow. In roughly 9 years, we have gone from discovering only 2 interstellar visitors in all of recorded history to confirming a third, one of the oldest and strangest yet. What does that pace tell us? Are these objects becoming more common, or are we simply, finally, building the tools sensitive enough to notice them for the first time? The scientific consensus, as of the most recent data in 2026, remains firm and grounded. 3Iatlas is almost certainly a natural interstellar comet, an ancient icy wanderer shaped by billions of years of drifting through the emptiness between stars. Not a spacecraft, not a probe, not a vessel carrying any kind of intelligence. The SETI search found nothing. The chemistry, while extraordinary, fits within the boundaries of natural processes scientists are still working to fully understand. But consensus is not the same thing as certainty, and the questions this object leaves behind are not small ones. What kind of star did this thing form around, and does that star still exist? What violent or gentle event, billions of years ago, finally knocked it loose and sent it drifting across the galaxy toward a rendezvous with a solar system that would not even exist for billions more years? How many more objects like this have already passed silently through our solar system in the centuries before we had the telescopes capable of noticing them? And perhaps the hardest question of all, the one no scientist can currently answer with any real confidence: if something out there in the vast dark between the stars ever did send something toward us on purpose, would we even recognize it in time? Or would it simply look just like this one did, like nothing more than an old, quiet, drifting piece of ice, gone again before we ever fully understood what we had seen?